This is Brother Peter Diamond, VaticanCatholic.com. In my documentary, The Michael Voris Deception, I prove with many facts that Michael Voris is unfortunately a heretic and a false teacher. He teaches the heresies of salvation outside the Church, justification by faith alone, and others. For instance, he promotes justification by faith alone by virtue of his promotion of and acceptance of the heretical joint declaration with the Lutherans on justification, which teaches justification by faith alone. Voris also completely deceives his audience about what has happened to the Church since Vatican II, whether Vatican II teaches heresy, whether Benedict XVI promotes false ecumenism, religious indifferentism, modernism, etc. All that's covered in the video. Voris's position and many of his lies are completely exposed. Near the end of that video, I also demonstrate that Michael Voris begins each of his vortex episodes by conjuring a vortex, a whirling mass of fluid or air, a whirlwind. He conjures this whirlwind into existence out of nowhere, and he actually invites people into his vortex. I explained in the video how what he's doing is essentially casting a spell on people. It's a mini occult ritual in which he sucks people into this vortex which he has conjured. And I explain how I believe that this plays a role in how influential he has become in the false conservative segment of the Vatican II Church. And what's very interesting is I recently looked at his YouTube channel, and I don't almost ever watch his videos anymore. I watched many of his videos in preparation for my documentary, The Michael Voris Deception. But since that documentary has been published and he has been completely refuted and exposed, I have almost no interest to watch his videos, because it's just the same ridiculous conclusion about the Vatican II Church, stated in many different ways. However, I checked into his channel to see what he was up to, and I noticed something very interesting which coincides with what I covered about his mini spell and his conjuring of a vortex. When he's in the vortex, as we see in these videos, Michael Voris's videos get thousands of views after just a few days or a week. Obviously, he has many heretical Novus Ordo groups linking to him, but there's a lot of interest in his videos when he's speaking from within the vortex. But when he does a video outside of the vortex, for example here, Mic'd Up Michael Voris interviews David Carlin, an hour-long interview, the view totals are totally different. They're not even close. This video has 590 views after a week. It's the same guy speaking, Michael Voris. What accounts for this massive disparity in view totals? And as we'll see, this doesn't just apply to 1 or 2 or 3 videos. This is almost every single video he puts out when he's not in the vortex, compared to the videos he puts out when he's in the vortex. Here are more videos in which he's back in the vortex, and we see thousands of views after a week. Here's another example. The results are in thousands of views after a week. But when he's out of the vortex, as we see here, Mic'd Up Pew Research Stats on Catholics, 620 views after a week. Here's another one. Mic'd Up Protestantism and Liberalism, 421 views after a week. Here's another one. Mic'd Up America is Unaffiliated with Religion, 245 views after a week. There's no comparison. And this is true of almost every single video he does when he's not in the vortex, compared with the videos he does when he's in the vortex. Why aren't people interested in hearing the same guy when he's not in the vortex? And this applies to videos of all lengths, an hour, 7 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. Videos that are as long, as short, or longer than his vortex episodes. You could just give example after example. Here's another one. Mic'd Up, out of the vortex, not even 600 views. And I believe the reason is that people are more interested, these bad-willed individuals in the Vatican II Church, in what he has to say, because he's putting them under a mini spell. The devil is active. And this guy's a major deceiver and false teacher who's feeding them an antichrist lie. And the devil's using this mini spell he casts to just make them more receptive. Obviously, their own bad will, their own thirsting after the lie, is the prime factor in their deception. But this mini spell plays an additional role. It makes him more interesting to them when he's speaking to them from within the vortex. They enter into his domain. And despite all of the facts that continue to come out about Benedict XVI's apostasy and his heresies, Voris is undeterred. He persists in promoting the same lie. Here we have another video in which he's alleging that Benedict XVI's on the warpath once again, assaulting the errors of our time, when Benedict XVI just put out a book promoting Nestorianism, attacking the historical truth of the gospel accounts, promoting modernism on page after page after page. And that's just the tip of the iceberg as far as his heresies are concerned. Yet the liar and deceiver Voris is able to continue to promote the same totally debunked and refuted nonsense that Benedict XVI opposes modernism and heresy. And these people eat it up. That really shows you how bad-willed these people are. They hate the truth. That's why so many of them disliked the documentary, The Michael Voris Deception. Even though, of course, they can't refute any of the facts, they just reject them because they're not of the truth. And that's why few are saved. Voris also recently put out a video called Are Non-Catholics Saved?, in which he promotes the heresy that there is salvation outside the church and for non-Catholics, as long as you hold that they're not saved by their false religions, as long as you hold that they're saved by the Catholic Church. So there is salvation outside the church, but it is by the Catholic Church. No, that's heresy. The church teaches that all who die outside the church are not saved. It doesn't teach that a non-Catholic can be saved by the church. There is no salvation without the Catholic faith. There is no salvation for any non-Catholic. That's why they all must be converted to be saved. Period. What Voris promotes is simply a denial of defined dogma. I will close this video with two sections from the documentary, The Michael Voris Deception. The two sections concern, first, Michael Voris's promotion of the heresy of faith alone, by virtue of his acceptance of the joint declaration with the Lutherans on justification. The second section is the conclusion to the documentary. For example, Voris's false position, which we've been analyzing, not only causes him to lead people back to the sources of heresy and apostasy, namely Vatican II, Paul VI, John Paul II, and Benedict XVI, but it actually results in his direct promotion of Protestantism. His organization actually put out a YouTube video which endorsed and promoted the 1999 Vatican Lutheran Agreement on Justification. The following clip is from his organization's YouTube video called Joint Catholic Lutheran Statement 1031.
In the year 1999, representatives of the Catholic Church signed a document together with representatives of the Lutheran World Federation, a document known as the Joint Declaration on the Doctrine of Justification. This declaration states that the mutual condemnations of the Reformation times do not apply to the Catholic and Lutheran teachings, as they are expressed within the document. Although there are some important aspects of the justification that are not resolved by the Joint Declaration, it is an important landmark, helping the theological dialogue that seeks to create mutual understanding and greater agreement between Christians in fidelity to the truth.
The joint declaration with the Lutherans on justification is outrageously heretical. See our article and video called Vatican Lutheran Agreement on Justification Exposed for all of the details. But in short, the joint declaration with the Lutherans teaches that the primary Lutheran heresies on justification, including justification by faith alone, as well as Martin Luther's idea at the same time just and a sinner, and more, are no longer condemned by the Council of Trent. The joint declaration proclaims that Trent's dogmatic decrees, which condemned these Lutheran heresies, no longer apply. The joint declaration also teaches that the remaining differences between Lutherans and Catholics on justification are no longer the occasion for doctrinal condemnations. That's blatantly heretical, because the Council of Trent solemnly declared that anyone who does not accept its teaching on justification is condemned. The joint declaration is a complete denial of the Catholic faith and a promotion of Protestantism. Anyone who tells you otherwise has no idea what he is talking about or is a liar. That includes Michael Voris. In fact, when the joint declaration was promulgated, it was promulgated with two other documents called the Official Common Statement and the Annex to the Official Common Statement. In the Annex to the Official Common Statement, Section 2C, which again accompanied the Joint Declaration, both the Lutherans and the Vatican II Church simultaneously declare that they believe in justification by faith alone. Quote, Justification takes place by grace alone, by faith alone. The person is justified apart from works." End quote. So, Michael Voris's organization endorses the Vatican Lutheran Agreement on Justification. They speak of it in positive terms as an important landmark. That means that Michael Voris promotes Protestantism, the idea that faith alone is not a heresy, that Trent no longer condemns Lutherans, that Trent's canons no longer apply, and that one is justified by faith alone. This is a prime example of what I mentioned earlier, how his false position on Vatican II, Benedict XVI, and the cause of the present crisis results in his promotion of the very things he denounces. Since Voris adheres to Benedict XVI and blinds himself to the truth that Benedict XVI is a manifest heretic and an anti-pope, Voris winds up accepting and promoting the heresies contained in what Benedict XVI approves. Both Benedict XVI and John Paul II approved and praised the Vatican Lutheran Agreement on Justification. Benedict XVI teaches that the, quote, Orthodox who reject the papacy are inside the church. That's blatant heresy. Benedict XVI also teaches that the, quote, Orthodox don't need conversion, and that their leaders are, quote, pastors in the church. But you won't hear that if you've been sucked into the vortex. That brings me to my next point, and it is probably the most frightening and revealing point in this video. Imagine if someone had a religious show, and he began each episode by saying, quote, "Welcome, I will now draw you into my spiritual plane," and then he waved a wand in the air. You would probably conclude that an occultist, or a wizard, or a magician had just attempted to cast a spell on you. Well, that's essentially what Michael Voris does to begin every episode of his show. In the following clips, notice the vigor with which he is attempting to spin you into his vortex. These clips are from his videos, The Pope in the News, Priest Said What, Church Division, and How Evil Works, although hundreds of other examples could be given.
Hello everyone and welcome to The Vortex, where lies and falsehoods are trapped and exposed. I'm Michael Voris. Hello everyone and welcome to The Vortex, where lies and falsehoods are trapped and exposed. I'm Michael Voris. Hello everyone and welcome to The Vortex, where lies and falsehoods are trapped and exposed. I'm Michael Voris. Hello everyone and welcome to The Vortex, where lies and falsehoods are trapped and exposed. I'm Michael Voris.
A magic circle is the place occultists enter to cast spells. They make a circle, and they believe that making a circle and entering into it enables them to transcend the physical world, to invoke demons, and to bring about spells. In every episode of his show, Michael Voris makes a circle with his pencil in order to welcome people into his vortex. He doesn't use the pencil for almost anything else except to, like a wand, usher people into the vortex. Jimmy Page, the Satanist and guitarist for the band Led Zeppelin, was a practitioner of the occult. He conducted satanic rituals on stage. As part of his satanic ritual, he used a violin bow as a wand in order to point around in all directions. A vortex is a whirling mass of fluid or air. The vortex of which Voris speaks is not a naturally occurring one. It's something else. More on that in a bit. Now, some people might say, Michael Voris does not intend to do anything occultic. His words and actions are simply a neat or funny way to get people to think outside the box, to focus in. I agree that Michael Voris does not intend to be occultic, but in response I would say that many people use Ouija boards simply because they think it's funny or neat. and they wind up getting possessed nevertheless. It doesn't matter what one intends when one conjures things or engages in spiritual activity that is outside of God's boundaries. The end result is the entrance and the influence of evil spirits. Moreover, this is not something that Michael Voris says or does once in a while. It's part of every program, including programs that purport to be serious religious discussions. They begin with him conjuring a vortex, and he doesn't just do this in his introduction. The vortex, or whirling mass which he has conjured, is then displayed throughout his videos. Notice how it appears out of nowhere, well after the introduction, in the middle of his videos. It's integral to his presentations. The following clips from The Pope and Civilization and The Pope and the World are typical.
America religious with an axe to grind. The difference between the city of man and doing this, he has sent a clear signal to other bishops to stop playing games.
Not only does the vortex appear at different times in his videos, but Michael Voris is frequently pictured with the vortex he has conjured behind him, as if he's speaking to you from within the vortex. Notice how it covers him in the background. Michael Voris has become perhaps the most significant figure in what we would call the, quote, conservative wing of the Vatican II Church. This wing encompasses people who adhere to Vatican II and the post-Vatican II anti-popes, but they are at least spiritually awake enough to recognize severe problems with the post-Vatican II Church. Since they manifest some level of opposition to the post-Vatican II orientation, Satan works diligently to keep this crowd deceived and off balance, lest they find the full truth and save their souls. Voris has arguably become the most popular voice in this movement, having superseded the disgraced John Carapi and other figures. By the way, well before the public became comfortable with the notion that John Carapi is a spiritual phony, we pointed it out. I firmly believe that one of the reasons Voris has become so popular and so influential is because he's casting a mini spell on the people who let themselves be sucked into his vortex. Even though he does not intend to invoke demons, his actions are occultic, even if subtly, because he is attempting to conjure something into existence outside the bounds of Catholic worship. It's interesting that a vortex is something you are sucked into. Michael Voris's mission from Satan is to suck the people who care a little bit more into the big lie that Benedict XVI, the head devil who is currently leading the Vatican to apostasy and the promotion of modernism, is actually a good guy leading the fight against it. Voris's mission is to tell people that the sources and cause of the apostasy, namely Vatican II and the post-Vatican II anti-popes, are actually the solutions. When you see the lies and the heresies of Voris that I covered earlier in this video, and the disastrous consequences that flow from his positions, including the promotion of justification by faith alone, one should not be surprised by any of this. The dogmatic facts we've covered prove it. Until some months ago, I was barely familiar with Michael Voris, but after we received some questions about him and we viewed some of his videos, I began to make a careful study. Frankly, I was often amazed by the amount of influence he achieved when one considers that his conclusion on the present crisis is so patently false and ridiculous. After all, I thought, who could really buy the idea that there's all of this rot and modernism in the church, that heresy is dominating in diocese after diocese, at parish after parish, promoted by bishop after bishop, yet Benedict XVI has nothing to do with it, and is actually a bulwark of orthodoxy? It's nonsense, and frankly, one has to be very deceived to accept it. I was surprised that so many did, and I believe that one of the reasons he's been so successful in pushing it is the diabolical help he's receiving, the mini spell he subtly works to suck people into his vortex. As Voris himself says in his video, Abortion and the Diabolical, everything occurring is reflective of the spiritual war, forces that are not always visible.
As Catholics, we pay special attention to the recognition that everything that is happening on earth between humans is a reflection of the spiritual war that is really going on sort of behind the scenes.
I'm not saying that everyone who has watched a video done by Voris has fallen under a spell, but I believe that some of them have, and more broadly, that through him and his act of conjuring, the devil is activated to soften his listeners up for his big lie and his message in general. It's sad for me to point this out because Voris has some good things to say, and he comes across as amiable, but a level of truth and likability is what makes him more deceptive. We wrote to Voris a few months ago and charitably informed him that his position is untenable. We told him that Benedict XVI is more heretical than any bishop he criticizes, and that he, Voris, is trying to work from within a counter-church. The Vatican II sect is not the Catholic Church. We directed him to dogmatic facts on the issue. We also challenged him to a debate on the issue of Benedict XVI's validity. He did not respond, and he continued to promote the same nonsense about Benedict XVI afterwards. One must say that he is an obstinate deceiver and a false prophet who is peddling insidious and outrageous lies, which keep people locked into submission to Antichrist heretics, worshipping at the invalid new Mass, and in communion with the deniers of Jesus Christ. And his message is all the more dangerous because it's shrouded in some Catholic truth. Here's a clip where he's trying to convince you of his big lie. It's from his video, The Pope and the World, where he's telling you that Benedict XVI is whipping the bishops into line and setting the course to save souls.
In doing this, he has sent a clear signal to other bishops to stop playing games. He has instructed them on multiple occasions to get with the program and get back to the business of saving souls.
Here's a clip from his video a la carte, where he's attempting to convince you that Benedict XVI, the man who doesn't even believe in the gospel, is preaching the unvarnished faith just as St. Paul did.
Hello everyone and welcome to The Vortex, where lies and falsehoods are trapped and exposed. I'm Michael Voris, coming to you this week from Rome. Last week here in Rome, at an annual talk he gives to his priests, Pope Benedict delivered a no-holds-barred address in which he said priests must not water down the faith because people are made uncomfortable by it. This is why St. Paul preached the hard, unvarnished truth in his day, and 2,000 years later, standing in the same city he was executed in, Pope Benedict is extolling his priests to do the same.
Here's a clip from his video Practical Schism, where he's telling you that there is a practical schism in the post-Vatican II Church, but he says that John Paul II, the one who actually led the Vatican II counter-church and the charge for false ecumenism, was warning people about the counter-church.
Any Catholic with his or her wits about him knows this is true. Operating within the confines of the church from inside is what Pope John Paul called the anti-church. This is true in diocese after diocese all over America, all over the world.
Voris is meant to misdirect people from the true conclusion, which is that there is an anti-church, but that the anti-church was constructed and led by the Vatican II claimants to the papacy, men who purported to be true popes, but were and are actually heretical anti-popes, and that the true Catholic Church still exists, but it has been reduced to a remnant because we are living through the great apostasy foretold in Scripture and in Catholic prophecy. In his video, The Pope's Spiritual Calculus, Voris's distortion of the true conclusion is on full display. He draws a stunning contrast which clearly illustrates why his message is diabolical. He tells you that Benedict XVI is the man rooting out relativism and heresy, and that Benedict XVI tells people how it should be done. He then contrasts Benedict XVI with the rot and heresy in the Church, and he says that the bishops are to blame.
So when you take a look, a big picture look at what the Holy Father has said during his nearly 6 years as Pope, it all comes into focus. He began talking about a dictatorship or a tyranny of relativism. Not so long after that, he began to talk about the filth in the church. And by the way, these are all his words. Not so long ago, he spoke of the need for the bishops to begin acting like bishops and root out heresy where they find it by use of their episcopal authority. The list of symptoms of the current crisis is too long to enumerate, but there is one undeniable point. The sun is setting on an entire world, and a huge number of Catholic bishops are to blame. A few have openly preached heresy. Many of them have quietly sat by and allowed it to fester. In either case, they are to blame. That the Pope believes this as well is easily ascertainable by what he has now said for 6 years.
Since he serves as Satan's surrogate, hiding the true conclusion and protecting the leader of the counterchurch, it's no surprise that Voris did not have a word to say about Assisi III, Benedict XVI's apostate meeting with various false religions, on October 27, 2011. The vortex, which God allowed Satan to devise, is subject to Satan's rules and dictates. No criticism of Satan's biggest henchman is allowed therein. Thus, there was no condemnation of Assisi III in the vortex, an event which included about 300 people, representing a wide array of false religions. Benedict XVI invited Jews, Buddhists, Hindus, pagans, witch doctors, Protestants, schismatics, and even atheists and agnostics to present their religious views and engage in worship. This meeting without question constituted apostasy by deed, just like the previous two Assisi events. Such events were specifically condemned as an abandonment of the Catholic faith in Pope Pius XI's 1928 encyclical, Mortalium Animos. During the recent Assisi meeting, Wande Abimbola, who represented Yoruba African religions, sat 2 spots from Benedict XVI. Like the other representatives, Benedict XVI arranged it so that Abimbola could address the assembly. Abimbola's followers perform ancient magic rituals, with drumbeats, chanting, dances, sacrifices, and communication with a spirit through possession. During his speech at the Assisi prayer meeting, made possible by Benedict XVI, Abimbola invoked the Yoruba deity Olokun and chanted to the accompaniment of a rattle. The reason you won't hear a condemnation of all of this in the vortex is that the same spirit Abimbola invoked, and which guides Benedict XVI, also whipped up the vortex.